Thank everyone for joining us for what promises to be an incredible journey behind the lens with Cheesemans co-owner and co-CEO and wildlife photographer, Scott Davis. Scott's dedicated years to exploring and capturing the wild beauty of some of the most remote places on Earth. And today, he'll be sharing some of his hand-chosen images from our South Georgia and Antarctic Peninsula trips. Scott will walk us through the stories, his techniques, and the challenges behind his favorite shots. And whether you're a seasoned photographer or you simply are an admirer of nature like we are, we hope that you enjoy Scott's insights into shooting down there. And make sure that you stick around, because at the end, we're going to do a live Q&A with Scott. He's going to answer some of your questions about photography or his experiences at the bottom of the globe. And remember, we have pretty much over 100 participants today, so please be patient. We're going to try to get to all the questions in the amount of time that we have. In the meantime, as Scott goes through the images, if you have a question, please post it in the chat, and I'll try to monitor those as we go along so that I can give them to Scott at the end. Now, I would like to thank everyone for joining us, and no one wants to hear me talk any longer, so let's sit back and enjoy the journey through Scott's lens to one of the most awe-inspiring places on Earth, South Georgia and the Antarctic Peninsula. Scott, if you're ready, let's start off with our first image. What do you think?
Yes, just wanted to say thank you for everyone coming out on this Saturday morning, showing up. It's beautiful weather out here in California, and hopefully after our little chit chat today, you guys get to go outside and enjoy the beauty that's all around us. As Adam pointed out, this is just more of a casual talk that we'll do today. It's no big presentation, but more of a kind of a brief tour through one of the places that I find most attractive to me personally on this planet. I see a lot of familiar faces out there, a lot of people who have joined us on past adventures to South Georgia and Antarctica, and there's a reason why I keep going back, and many of the faces that I see who have joined us today keep going back. It truly is one of those magical places. This photo that kind of popped up right here, I will admit that a lot of the photos, when you've traveled down there, this is my 15th season down there, you come away with so many amazing images and moments that it's really hard to choose truly like favorites. They're going to kind of sway back and forth depending on your mood that day. So I actually asked a few of the staff, I gave them a selection of images that I've liked, and they helped me pick some images. So if you come back tomorrow or came back another week, you might see an entirely different set. And that's the beauty of traveling to these places. One day you'll come away with dozens of fantastic keepers. The next day you'll come up with some new ones. But this one in particular represents a visit to South Georgia. And I'll say one of the amazing things about going to South Georgia and Antarctic in particular is that the wildlife there, it evolved without the presence of humans until recent human history, the last couple hundred years. And as a result, the animals there really, they don't show any fear. And so it allows you to get into positions that you might not be able to do, like if you were in Africa or the Amazon, where, the animals there do show a little hesitation to close proximity. Here, that's not so much the case. So what we're looking at are a couple of wandering albatross. Wandering albatross, if you haven't seen them up close and personal, they're this fascinating, comical, beautiful bird of the wind. They spend most of their time at sea, and they only come to shore for a brief moment for courtship and egg laying. And then they spend the rest of the world gliding on the winds of the ocean, seeking out their food until it's time to go back and court and lay eggs again. So if you happen to be at South Georgia during these times, you are in for an amazing witnessing of just fantastic animal behavior. In this case, if you're patient, and I think that's one of the keys to being a wildlife photographer, is being patient. If you stay in a spot, things will come to you. And in this case, they did. I stayed in a single spot, and kind of certainly unplanned at that moment, albatross male had decided to land not too far from me. And there he started spreading his wings in hopes of attracting a female. And sure enough, a female did show up. And this is a case where, sitting still for about, I would say, 2 hours in this case, this event unfolded right before me. And South Georgia is one of those places where you don't need a big zoom lens. And so I always travel to these places with kind of actually a small kit. And I had my wide angle lens. This is a 16 to 35 shot, 35 millimeter shot. And so it allowed this kind of intimate moment to photograph as this male tried to entice this female to, be his mate. And so it allowed me to sit there and wait for the shots. And often with wildlife photography, I'm looking for frames within a frame. So if you sat there for long enough, this frame within a frame where the albatross male's wing kind of created this natural framing of the event. And then, of course, when you have this background, and there's actually another albatross in the background just trying to find his little nesting spot or a place where he can maybe attract a mate of sorts. So South Georgia is one of these dramatic places, mountains and clouds and winds and animals that you can certainly walk away with a fantastic moment like this. So for this reason, I kind of have always favored this shot in particular. It kind of helps represent some of the magic that takes place there. All right. Well, this, again, South Georgia Island. Whenever we can, we like to combine South Georgia with Antarctica. And South Georgia should be on every wildlife photographer or every wildlife lover's bucket list, because when you go there, you are inundated with life, with concentrations of life, elephant seals, albatross, numerous other seabirds, penguins, king penguins, as far as the eye can see, leopard seals, crab-eater seals, all sorts of animals you might encounter there. So there's no telling what might show up. Even orcas we've had show up around those spots when we've done there. So when I'm out looking for a shot, I'm often trying to find something that might be a little bit more unique than, a casual portrait of, say, elephant seal. I've got hundreds, if not thousands, of elephant seal photos. So when I come across something that's a little bit more abstract, I will kind of explore and play with that. And that's kind of what happened in this moment, where I came over a little bit of a bluff, just kind of wandering around, because often you go out, you don't know what you're going to see that day. And if you just kind of leisurely take a stroll, often shots will come to you. In this case, it did. I came over a bluff and I was actually looking down on a beach full of elephant seals. It was kind of a windy, cold day, and the elephant seals were all huddled together. And I started looking at them with their different textures and their different colors as they had kind of all squashed themselves together for body heat, body warmth. And it kind of presented itself as a puzzle piece. So with a lens like a 1:400 zoom, you can kind of zoom in and find out these little puzzle pieces that kind of might give you a nice little photo that's beyond a typical portrait of these animals or a typical behavioral shot. So in this case, this was what I was kind of looking for, and I walked away with a shot that, for me, I've always found interesting, just a visual puzzle piece of animal life there too. And if you look closely, you can see all the details, especially, beauty of, photography is we can blow our photos up big. And so when you get in there, you can see all the details, all the whiskers, but when you pull back, you see your kind of angles and your shadows. And so, yeah, I like this shot. Now, this is a photo of a black-browed albatross, actually from last season. And again, when you have I guess, the fortune to go and visit these places numerous times, you can start to be more selective on the shots that you're going for. I have, again, hundreds of albatross photos. A lot of them are flying shots. A lot of them are, wings that are stretched. And so sometimes you start looking for something a little bit different. And in this case, as we get closer to the islands, that's when we really start to see the albatross start to follow our ship. And so in this case, most people that are really into birds or photography, they're out on deck, and we're all sitting on the back deck, and we're just watching these acrobats of the air kind of flying to and fro, and we're waiting for good light. We're waiting for, precise moments where there's maybe a little bit more action going. And in this case, I was able to follow with our cameras today. They're so good at helping us follow the action with their autofocus systems. And this guy was just skimming right over the edge of the water. And that's where I find them to be at their most dynamic, when they're kind of back and forth. It's pretty cool to watch. And it's even better when you are able to grab a quick photo. So in this case, I would say the water's edge, the breaking wave just below him, helped create that frame within a frame, which I'm always excited to see when I'm taking my photos. And it helped frame this albatross. The bent wings kind of gives an impression of speed. And these guys, they are fast when they're zooming in and out and up and down. And it takes a little bit of practice and skill. And luckily for us, we have the time when we're on these cruises. So as mentioned, we're out there for a couple hours for the people that really want to come away with some fantastic shots. So this is one of my favorite albatross in flight shots, just because of the lighting. As photographers, we're always looking for good lighting. We're looking for dramatic moments, and also a little environment. So in this case, I think we were able to kind of capture all three of those components and then throw it in, coming away with a shot that hopefully, I don't think I was the only one getting happy shots of their albatross in flights and other species. And this is one of my favorite from last year's trip to South Georgia.
Scott, is this dawn or dusk?
This is sunset. We had a little bit of backlighting, back and side lighting, as you might be able to tell from the photo. We had some hardcore photographers and people with their binoculars out, just kind of enjoying the last light of the day. And so often that's when you're going to get your most dramatic lighting. As opposed to shooting midday when the light is a bit more flat. So here we have that kind of really, really contrasty light. And the animals were in abundance. And it comes and goes. So the more time that you spend outside, the more time or more opportunities you're going to get to, photograph these moments. Because if you only go out there and you spend 10 minutes, you might only have 3 birds flying around. But if you stay, and often was the case, you get 3 birds, and then all of a sudden you got 30 birds. So now you've just, maximized exponentially your opportunities to get the shots. So as I mentioned, I see some familiar faces in our list here. And I can attest that almost all of the faces I see have spent a lot of time outside. And those are the people that I think really walk away from these trips with the maximum potential.
And Scott, just real quick, what lens is this with?
This lens was, I had a zoom lens, because a zoom lens of 180 to 600. Nikon, I happen to shoot most of my photography with Nikon, although I often will switch to other kits depending on if I'm on an assignment and I'm working with a team. But my personal kit is a Nikon kit, and they have a 180 to 600 mil lens. It's a really nice zoom because I can start following a bird from, say, a few hundred meters away. And as he starts to get a little bit closer, I can kind of pull that zoom. So as opposed to a prime lens where maybe you're stuck at 400 or only 500 or only 600, once that bird starts to get a little too close, now he's in that zone that you can't really photograph. So for images of birds in flight, I tend to gravitate or recommend the zoom lenses, the bigger zoom lenses. And it's certainly always in my kit when I go to Antarctica, having a big zoom, like a 2 to 500 or a 2 to 600 that they, pretty much every manufacturer has come out now with a big zoom lens, and they're super sharp. It used to be that you sacrificed quality having a zoom lens. You might sacrifice a little bit of the f-stop or ability to blur your backgrounds a little bit, but for the most part, there's very little compromise that you have to put up with now. Well, again, South Georgia. Again, a reason why we try to combine both South Georgia and Antarctica is we kind of double the amount of animal species we encounter. Elephant seals are in abundance during the time of season that we go down there. They're on the beaches, they're fighting, they're often, wrestling their females. A lot of activity on the beaches. And if you've ever been in close proximity to the big bulls, you can truly get a sense of size and power. This big bull here, he's probably about 6,000 pounds. When they're rearing up, they're, upwards of 7 feet tall, but they're about 14 feet long, 10 to 14 feet long. So you get these behemoth of animals. And if you sit and you wait, and that will be kind of a common theme with all wildlife photography, is sitting and waiting. Because if you do that, little moments will pop up. This guy, knowing him to be a big male, and during the time of the season, they're kind of broadcasting to the other males in the area, don't come, this is my territory, you stay away. And I would say 80% of the time, they're kind of sleeping, just these big blobs of mass, just most of the time sleeping, but they're kind of keeping their eyes open. So this guy was a little bit off to the side, and I love the fact that he was on snow, because most of the time when you're down in South Georgia, they're on sandy beaches, and they're among lots of other elephant seals. They're females, they're harem of females, and it's kind of brown on brown. But this guy had decided, maybe he was hot that day, he had decided to go lay down in the snow. And so it really offered this big contrast of his dark body and this white snow. And often, if I can find animals in snow, it really helps create a much more dynamic energy, at least in my opinion. With the colors down there, the king penguins come to mind with their golds and their yellows and their white chests and their black backs. Against a white snowy background, you can create some wonderful portraits, animal portraits of this. But this guy, he was on the snow, and knowing, having spent the better part of, I don't even want to admit it, 35 plus years working with wildlife as both a marine and wildlife biologist and as a wildlife photographer, you start to anticipate behaviors, what is about to happen. So I knew, given enough time, especially if another male came within eyesight of this guy, he was going to raise his head. And he was going to raise his head and give one of their big bellowing calls. And so I just kind of had to, sit still for a while. And it was probably about 45 minutes into this observation with him that I saw another male start to come within close proximity. And I anticipated, and thankfully it came to fruition, him raising his head. And as you can see, you're able to look right down their gullets, and they're emitting this deep, guttural, primordial sound. And that's when you snap a few shots. And he did that for about 15, 20 seconds, and then went back down again. But at that moment, I was happy. I had kind of gotten the image I had envisioned. And I walked away with something that I felt was a little bit special. Like I said, it's not too often that I see these guys on snow. And so I was able to walk away with something that was a little bit more unique compared to other elephant seal shots that I had. Very happy with it.
Scott, do you have any advice on this particular shot with it being a extremely white background in contrast with the dark animal and just settings and tips for handling the camera in that situation?
Sure. Well, the beauty today is most of our cameras that I'm seeing out there are, digital cameras. For the most part, people are not coming out with their old film cameras. And so it allows us instant feedback. So what I would suggest is you take a few test shots, because often with the snow, it's going to throw off your meter a little bit. You might get a very dark animal, or especially with snow as your background, it's going to fool the meter a little bit, and so you might have to compensate. So you do a few quick shots and review your shot, look at your histogram, make sure you aren't blowing out any details that you might want to keep. Now, I knew that for this photo, my main concern was getting the elephant seal in proper exposure. So I had plenty of time to do that as he was kind of sleeping there. So yes, do your test shots, look at your histogram, and then make adjustments. I typically am shooting in full manual mode. That way I have control over the aperture, I have control over the shutter speed, the ISO, and there's very little chance I'm going to blow my exposure after I've taken my first shot. So yes, with your digital cameras or your mirrorless cameras, you get instant feedback to make those corrections. Now, with South Georgia, it's really almost impossible to relay the sense of abundance that's there. Wide angles can give you a sense of it. Sometimes, in this case, I used a bigger zoom lens, just to get a little bit more of a compression effect. In the foreground are thousands, tens of thousands, probably upwards of 100,000 king penguins. You're going to see a mix of the brown oakum boys, the chicks, and then the adults are the ones with the white and the golden colors on their necks. And this is only just a small little slice. If you really want to try to encompass, you either have to use a super wide angle or can do kind of a panoramic and then splice those shots together, because I almost have to equate it to visiting Grand Canyon. You'll go there, you're standing on the lip of the Grand Canyon, and it really is impossible unless you are there to see the grand scale of this. And this area, this is St. Andrews Bay. Literally to the left, to the right, straight ahead, it's king penguins, along with other species, elephant seals, some of the skuas, all sorts of things coming in and out of the water, the shoreline, going back and somehow finding the chicks to feed their chicks. But if you can just imagine the sounds that are taking place, the smells, you got that many birds together, there's going to be smells, the wind, the temperature. It's a place that, again, photos don't do it justice completely. But if you can find ways to kind of give a sense of the mass of wildlife there. In this case, like I mentioned, I think I used a 1 to 400 mil lens and just concentrated kind of this compression shot down the line of all these thousands and thousands of king penguins. And luckily for us, it was a nice day. The clouds were out. The sun was kind of peeking in and out, giving a much softer light. And if you can find those moments when the sun isn't so harsh, maybe a little bit muted by the clouds that are passing by, those are the moments I choose to photograph.
Scott, what part of the season was this particular shot taken?
This was early season. This was about the time that we do a lot of our trips, October, November. That's when you see a lot. We try to time it for a lot of the courtship behavior that's happening with the king penguins. So you can go there and they have chicks from the previous year. You might even get some that are still on eggs, and you might get some that are fresh from that season. So you get the whole gamut of animal behavior that time. I love finding king penguins when they're in their courtship, because they're kind of doing this little head dance with each other, and then they're doing their trumpeting, and then they go back to it, and then that's in one area. Then you look off to the left, and then you see one of the adults trying to find their chick to feed, but he's being chased by 20, 30 other brown penguin chicks. And that's comical aspect. And those are moments almost worth shooting video of, because now you've got this Benny Hill moment of the parent being chased by just this multitude of little ones. So that's one of the reasons that we love going during that time of the year. You see a lot of different behaviors. If you go during later in the year, things might be a little bit muddier. Some of the colonies, especially down in Antarctica, with the summer temperatures, the snow has melted to some degree, and a lot of the colonies have now become some mud pits, and you got a lot of muddy stuff with the animals. And during early time of the year, it's that snowy time, and the peaks are still covered in snow. And I would say there really isn't a bad time to go, but there are kind of phases if you're going for certain images and looks that you're going to. So certainly October, November are one of my favorite times to go.
And then is this a handheld shot, or is it taken from a tripod? And then are there restrictions regarding tripods down there?
Well, currently there are restrictions with tripods. As most of us are aware of, there were signs of avian bird flu having made its way to those areas. So as a precaution, we don't bring our tripods. But to be honest, I've always felt tripods down there as more of a hindrance. They kind of slow you down, and sometimes, especially with today's cameras, they're so good at being handheld. You can raise your ISO to get faster shutter speeds, and so shooting images with really slow shutter speeds just to be able to acquire enough light, it's kind of, for the most part, a thing of the past. So when I am traveling down there and I'm going from point A to point B on our landings, I like to be quick and mobile so I can get to a place. You might see an area that you want to shoot and it's a half a mile or a mile away. Bringing your tripod can sometimes slow you down, or it just becomes a burden more than a helper. So me personally, I rarely have used tripods down there. There might be a very specific shot I want that I might use it, but in the past, I found myself much more productive without a tripod.
And then what is your auto ISO limit on this particular shot?
This one, we still had enough light. So when possible, I shoot low ISOs as much as I can, combined with a shutter speed that's still going to give me a sharp shot. So this ISO, this was probably about 1,000, which on today's cameras is nothing. Minimal noise to deal with, minimal grain to deal with, but still plenty of light to get a fast shutter speed. Shutter speed on this was about 1,000th of a second, which is more than capable of, freezing that moment for birds that aren't in flight. These are penguins standing and occasionally turning their heads or going through some courtship behavior, or some of the chicks are walking around. But 1,000th of a second is more than fast enough to freeze this moment.
Is it fixed ISO? Sorry.
For me, since I'm shooting full manual mode, I tend to fix my ISO, but a lot of people will do a auto ISO, and certainly with today's software and post-editing software, auto ISO works, I think, almost just as effectively. I personally like to know exactly what my ISO is when I'm shooting. That way I'm not surprised when I go back to edit and see that auto ISO raised it up to 7,000 of a second, and maybe that's not where I wanted to be. it's kind of just keeping tabs on your shot, the lighting conditions, and constantly referring back to what your settings are. Now, it does take a little bit more effort just to be aware of what you're shooting. Sometimes you might not want to, especially in a fast action moment where so much is happening. You might want to put it on an auto feature, and just that way it's one less stress. And then if the camera does make a bit of a mistake, again, the software today lets you make a lot of corrections to realign the photo to what you wanted, as far as if it was too much grain. Lots of anti-noise software out there that does a phenomenal job. It's kind of changed the game, really. This is one of those special days in Antarctica when you're down there. It's glassy calm. Uh, if you close your eyes, you could hear the blows across. This is Wilhelmina Bay. You could close your eyes and you would hear the blows of humpback whales that are gathering to feed. Um, and it's one of those days that you go down there to experience. Uh, you never know, a week out what the weather is going to be. The weather is constantly changing down there, and you're blessed sometimes with these magic days where everything's calm, quiet, serene, and other days it's exciting, it's challenging. But this was one of those glassy magic days, and so we drop our zodiacs and we spend our time out there, and we're kind of quietly following some of the whales that come up in the area. We keep a respectful distance, but sometimes the whales come to you. And this is one of those cases. Having been around whales pretty much, again, for 30, 40 years now, you start to also anticipate that moment of peak action. And for me, that moment of peak action when you're following off to the side of a whale is when their tail is just coming up. They're getting ready to dive, and you see this waterfall of ocean just kind of going off their fluke. And that to me is like a prime time to shoot. Because it's only there for less than a second before it goes full vertical, and then they go down and they dive. So luckily for us, we often have numerous opportunities with the whales to get the type of shot that you're going for. We also, maybe if we're doing ID shots, this isn't a great ID shot, but we work with Happy Whale and other entities out there they're using, and so we need more of a kind of a profile shot of the fluke in those cases, and those are great for scientific images. But when you're going for something a little bit more, I guess, lack of a better word, artistic, I love the soft curve of the whale. I love the water action coming down. I'm shooting at a fast shutter speed to freeze those little drops of water coming off the edge. I would say probably about 2,000th of a second in this case. And then, of course, we had soft light. The sun was kind of behind the clouds. At some point in Antarctica, you will get overcast days. Pretty much that's a guarantee. Sometimes you get bright sunny days, but it's usually the overcast days that give us the phenomenal photo, I guess, conditions to go shoot. So you get this soft, muted lighting. You've got this giant humpback whale tail that's in front of you, and then you can walk away with this stellar background, and it all comes together. And this is certainly one of those days. So this is where I am looking for a shot that kind of helps tell a little bit of a story, which if you go down there, you will see thousands of stories every single day. And if you spend time and you know these areas and you know the situation that's arising, this is a king penguin, but in the background is this kind of wall of young chicks, the Oakham boys, the brown fluffy chicks. And I used, again, a background to help frame a portrait shot, to help tell a story. It adds a little bit of, I guess, this kind of almost spooky aspect to it. Almost, yeah, I guess this, yeah, maybe a spooky is the word, this ominous backdrop. But you're close and you can pull out the detail of the king penguin. In this case, we can see his eyes clearly, the feather patterns. And then when he turns his head, he gives us this nice profile. Again, the muted lighting, backlit, kind of gives this rim lighting of penguin. And so it allows for these kind of unique kind of portrait opportunities where I could certainly just shoot a standalone portrait of a king penguin, but having the chicks as this backdrop adds a little bit more to the story. I used a very shallow depth of field, so you can experiment. You can use more depth of field if you want to, show the details of the chicks behind. But in this case, I'd like the ominous feeling of blurring out the background. So I think I shot this probably at full open aperture, maybe a f4 with this lens, because this again, zoom lens allows me to make composition choices without having to move my feet so much back and forth. I can use the lens zoom capabilities to create the composition that I want. So this one has always been like a shot that I've always liked, and I think this one was taken probably about 10 years ago on one of our trips to South Georgia. Now, again, spend enough time in Antarctica or South Georgia, you will see the weather change sometimes hourly. Snow is always one of my favorite times to photograph. Rain, a little bit more of a challenge. Windy conditions, that's fine. But when the snow starts coming down, I try to incorporate that into the photo. Again, using a shallow depth of field kind of gives this winter wonderland. This is a fur seal, kind of one of those iconic call of the wild shots. Anyone who's spent time around fur seals knows that they're constantly making noise. They're constantly calling and barking, and you kind of have to watch yourself around them because of all the animals down there, these are the ones that probably you have to pay attention to most. They're very territorial, especially during mating season. The bulls are so hopped up on testosterone. They're kind of fighting each other, and so for that reason, we don't get super close to them, and having a bigger zoom is going to keep you from getting in their crosshairs and coming after you. So we take extra care with that. But as a result, on those snowy days, you can walk away with some, really special storytelling shots. Here, I'm trying to capture a little bit of the energy of the environment, of the animal itself, shooting fast enough shutter speed that the moments are frozen, the snowflakes themselves are frozen. I like how the snowflakes are out of focus, and because it is super shallow depth of field, some will be in focus, some won't be. So it creates this winter wonderland scene. And then having, again, this soft lighting that we're often exposed to down there with this kind of pale blue background. It's just, for me, it's a pleasing shot. We're avoiding the high contrast, harsh lighting. Those snowy days are the days to pull out your camera, go out, and you will encounter just opportunities around every corner, because literally there's animals around every corner in South Georgia and Antarctica for almost every single day that we're out. Now this shot, again, when you've taken thousands upon thousands of king penguin shots, you start looking for something maybe a little bit more intimate, maybe a little bit more outside the box. In college, I remember taking an art history class. And so it exposed me to many, many different types of art, from the Renaissance period on up to modern and Cubism and all that. But one of the early paintings that always kind of stuck with me was Michelangelo's The Creation. And then later in life, I was able to travel to Italy, and I went to the Sistine Chapel, and I was able to look up and I see this. And if you're not familiar with that painting or that fresco, it covers the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. It's truly remarkable. But the fresco itself shows the hand of God touching, the hand of Adam, not our marketing director Adam, but the original Adam. And this photo kind of reminded me of that, just this little intimacy between two courting king penguins. And for that reason, this photo, again, it's kind of special to me. It kind of harkens back to my early days of being exposed to art, and then trying to incorporate maybe some of those influences into my photography, especially wildlife photography. So choosing, obviously, a very shallow depth of field, f4, and then fast enough shutter speed to make it crisp and sharp. Every little detail, the feathers, the little spikes on their tongues, all the details in their bills, and then having that blurred out background to isolate your subject, and then kind of that soft lighting again. Really, really nice. Now, this is another Antarctica photo. We don't see this. This is actually an emperor penguin with its chick, Happy Feet, for all of those that are familiar with that. We won't be seeing that on our upcoming trip because that's an entirely different Antarctica trip. But again, something that we'll be offering in the future, small scale trip taken in Snow Hill, and it's a very specialized trip. We don't see a lot of other wildlife, but again, when I'm photographing wildlife, I'm looking for these little intimate moments, and this is where those big zooms come in handy. So you can zoom in nice and tight, even though I was probably only maybe 20 feet away, 20, 25 feet away from the animal here. With the big zooms, you can get nice and tight, looking for these little moments. And so these moments are what I'm looking for. You can walk away with something rather than always just kind of getting a middle shot. It's the ones that we connect with. I think almost any parent out there or anyone who's ever had an animal or a connection with another living being, which I think is probably about 99% of us out there, we can relate to these moments of caring and intimacy with another creature. And so it's one of those emotions that kind of emotionally ties us to all that's happening with the world, and in this case, wildlife photography. So it's fun to be part of that.
Okay, that's the 10th one. We're going to break off into our Q&A now, guys. I actually have a question ready for you, Scott. When picking your ISO, how do you make the decision to go auto or not?
Like I sort of alluded to, auto ISO for me, I might choose it if I'm in an environment where there's action happening so quick that I don't want to be distracted by always having to figure out my settings. If I've worked quite a bit as a photojournalist as well, and sometimes you're in these scenarios where you don't have time to plan out each and every shot. You are in the scrum, and so having these auto features and with auto ISO, you can kind of limit the range where it goes, so you don't have it going off the 50,000 ISO, which much more difficult to correct in post-processing. So if I have time and I have time to review my shots after each one, that's when I'm in full manual mode, and because I know I don't want to go past 1,000 ISO, and I can make quick corrections in the other settings. So those are the moments that help me evaluate how much action is happening, how much time do I have to respond. If I have the time to kind of preconceive the photo, and I will set all my settings, do a quick test shot to make sure everything's great, and the light doesn't change, then I'm kind of locked in, and I know that I don't have to worry about my ISO changing on me and having to deal with it later in post-processing.
This one's a little bit of a higher level question. How would you characterize your personal style as a photographer, and like how did you build on your style to get where you are right now?
Ooh, that's a really great question. It's funny because I have to say that I've always just shot what I've liked, and people have come to me and they go, "Oh, you've got this style, you've got this look about your images that tells me, oh, this is a Scott Davis image, or this is an image," and I'm still to this day try to evaluate what it is that they see as my style. Now, what I do like to do, obviously, is I like stories that are going to be compelling, that grab you, and you might see a series of images, and hopefully you see something that maybe I've done or I've posted. I try to post at least every week on Instagram some new photo that I come across that I've taken, and you might start to see a style in there of like intimacy, abstract, a little bit graphic, graphic art in nature. I think that again goes back to my studies of art history in my early college days. So certainly they influenced how I might see things visually. But yeah, I don't know if there's a simple answer to your question. It comes from a variety of influences. I was impacted as a young kid, teenager, by photographers from the early days of National Geographic, Life magazine. Those were things that I would page through constantly, and so somewhere some of those styles stuck, and incorporate portraiture into my wildlife portraiture, people portraiture. So yeah, there's a little bit of a mix in there. And I think the longer that you do this craft, you start to gravitate to, something that's recognizable. People will look at you and go, "Oh, that's an Ann Lawback shot," or that's a Clark photo, that's an Adam shot. So yeah, the longer you do this, your style starts to kind of pop out more and more.
And then do you shoot single frame or burst mode?
With wildlife, I do use burst mode, because the difference between a millisecond can make the difference, especially if there's behavior going on. But usually it's short bursts. It's like da 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 da, like boom boom boom, boom boom boom. Rarely do I like go full Gatling gun, where I'm shooting 100 shots. I've been around some photographers, especially when you're on safari or something, and someone's just rattling off 10 seconds straight, and to me that represents a lot of post-processing work, because now you've got 700 shots of this one leopard, that now you're going to have to go through those 700. So I'll try to do short bursts, to catch that real precise moment, because like I said, sometimes a millisecond can make a difference between where an eye is looking or a mouth that's opening, or potentially if there's a fight going on, you have two elephant seals battling, a series of 2 seconds, you've got 40 shots to choose from these days, and you can kind of handpick that one little moment. When polar bears are walking, there's a moment where the legs cross, and it's much more aesthetically pleasing. So that's why I shoot those burst modes. I would say the times that I do a single shot is when I'm doing portraiture, like where it's a studio environment or a very controlled environment, and I can tell my subject, okay, a little bit more to the left, and I might do a quick shot. All right, let's move it again, boom. But those are very controlled scenarios, where you can kind of direct the action. With wildlife photography, you can't direct the action.
For some of our people that are in the group that aren't necessarily high-tech people, do you have a take on mirrorless cameras versus traditional?
Hey, I made the switch just recently, relatively recently. I would say about 3 years ago, I made the switch to mirrorless cameras. And again, I've never been one that gets locked into a way. If I find a tool that helps me improve my craft, I'll utilize it, especially if it makes things a little bit easier, so I can kind of concentrate on the composition and the lighting and the framing. Mirrorless cameras, they're fantastic. I admit I love having my mirrorless camera now, because within the viewfinder, I can quickly dial in real time what that photo is going to look like. There's no, or I would say most of the guesswork is now, left up to the intelligence of the camera, whereas you can focus on the creativity aspect of it, creating the image that you want to, and seeing in real time what that's going to look like, instead of like thinking you got the shot, looking after the shot and realizing, oh, damn, I didn't get it. So yes, mirrorless cameras, and certainly the prices are coming down. You can get a fantastic mirrorless camera body and a couple of good lenses for a fraction of the price they were when they first started coming out. So it's a good time to be a photographer. The choices of equipment that's being made available to us, and without breaking the bank or selling the house or filing for a divorce because your spouse found that you just bought another lens. Yeah, those days are rapidly disappearing.
Do you find that the mirrorless equates to lighter glass?
Yes. I don't know. I think it's a combination of engineering that's coming from the manufacturers now. They're able to have high quality glass, but maybe less of it. Better materials. All of my lenses, I've seen a dramatic reduction in weight over the last 2 decades. My 600 lens from 2 decades ago, easily 2 pounds heavier than my 600 my modern 600. So yes, you sell some of that old stuff, and if weight is an issue for you, which as we get older and airplane restrictions get tighter and tighter, weight starts becoming an issue. It's fantastic. Again, a good time to be here. And there's new zooms that are coming out. Again, it used to be that you sacrificed image sharpness and quality with the zoom lenses. Today's zoom lenses are super sharp if you got your settings right. And so they kind of replace the need to have 2 or 3 lenses when you have one lens that kind of does a lot of different jobs. Like I said, I have that 180 to 600, and it is a fantastic lens. It's sharp, and it gives me a huge range, especially for wildlife photography.
Now, with regards to the trip, Scott, what is so special about South Georgia? I mean, most people have heard of Antarctica, but why add South Georgia to the trip?
Well, my opinion is this. You're already going a huge distance to see Antarctica. For those who haven't seen South Georgia, it's relatively not that far away. It adds way more value to the trip and the experience itself. South Georgia to this day remains easily, one of my top destinations. I love going. The sheer abundance of wildlife that's there, the landscapes, everything about South Georgia is special. In fact, I would almost say that a good percentage of the people that go on our combo Antarctica South Georgia trip will often play South Georgia at, or even better than, some of what just Antarctica. So when you can combine the two together, it's a win-win situation. I've never met someone that has gone to South Georgia and regretted it. In fact, they were just thrilled that we are, one of the, I guess, relatively rare organizations that likes to combine those two. And so if you're going to go all that way, you might as well make it count, even more by adding that to the list. They're two very different ecosystems too. So it's not like if you do one or the other, you get tons of overlap. One ecosystem is dramatically different from the other, but both spectacular.
What, in regards to Antarctica, what are some specific environmental challenges that people can look forward to?
Well, Antarctica has a reputation for extreme weather. And you'd be right. You can have every type of weather within a day, sometimes within a couple of hours. So I would say the weather is going to be the biggest factor down there. Now, thankfully, we charter ships that are designed to deal with the weather. And it's also a place where you have to have plan A set up, plan B, plan C, and sometimes even plan D. Because maybe you wake up that morning and you say, well, this is today's goal. Of course, a weather change can come in there, and all of a sudden you have winds that are 60 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour, and you can't make those landings that you want to. Thankfully, because we've been doing this a long, long time, I think, for 35 years now or more, making expeditions down there, we have a wealth of experience to know what alternative plans can be, and can get us around the corner. We know we'll be out of the wind in that area, and we'll still be able to hopefully make new plans and something just as special or spectacular.
From a leader standpoint, what are some of the challenges that are faced with, just from an ecological standpoint, with walking around and doing hikes on the land?
Well, the way that we like to do our trips is it really doesn't matter what your, to most degrees, it doesn't matter what your physical capabilities, because we have a slot in there for almost everyone. We've had people in their late 80s who might be a little bit mobily challenged go on these trips, to younger, vigorous people that want to hike to the top of that mountain. So we're able to accommodate. We bring a lot of guides. We bring 15 guides down there, and so we're able to design very specific groupings for people that want to do the full Mount Everest climb to the top of a peak. Sure, you can go do that. We have groups that want to stay and leisurely photograph the animals or go for short walks. So we can kind of cater to everyone's individual taste. You don't have to be a wildlife photographer. You can just be, an adventure traveler. And certainly this is, both of these destinations are places that should be on everyone's bucket list, without a doubt.
If someone is not a fan of cold weather, what can they expect out of going to this trip? Because I know, like we said, there's two ecological places, and the difference between South Georgia and Antarctica.
Well, I would say, Antarctica, it's a polar place. It's not going to be Hawaii, but the prime thing to kind of keep in mind is being prepared. If you're wearing proper clothing, proper attire, it's really not what I would call anything more extreme than our typical winter weather here in the States. In fact, most people are surprised, since we are going during the Antarctic summer months, actually how moderate the weather is as far as temperature. The main thing down there is winds. You can get some pretty extreme winds that come up. And then, like I said, it goes to glassy conditions and then winds and all that. But from a temperature, or I don't like cold, if you have the proper attire, it's really quite nice to be around. In fact, there's times we've been around where you might just be wearing a light jacket and, your Gore-Tex outer layer, especially if you're walking around, you'll be unzipping. So yeah, I think we've somewhere seen a lot of the movies and the BBCs and the March of the Penguins of how extreme, but keep in mind some of that stuff is taken during the winter months, and it also adds drama to a lot of the stories that are out there. But in general, it's pretty darn nice. You can actually get a sunburn down there if you're not careful.
One last question. Is there anything specific gear-wise that someone should bring for their camera regarding just how cold it is, or the snow, or anything like that?
Always bring extra batteries. Since we are typically working anywhere from 20 degrees, 30 degrees, 40, sometimes 50 degrees, having extra batteries, because when we make our landings, if you go through your battery, and colder weather will tend to cause your batteries to exhaust a little bit quicker, bring your extra batteries. We are in a wet environment. If we're doing zodiacs, cruising, or even going to and from the ship to shore, there's a chance, especially if the winds pick up, that you might get splashes. So you'll want to have some sort of protection for your camera, some coverings, which, you know, pretty much every major camera store will sell you. You'll have that. Dry bags. You'll want dry bags if we're making landings and we're going through a surf zone or something like that, just in case there's the rogue splash that comes over there. Cameras are sophisticated electronic instruments and they don't like salt water. So just kind of keep that in mind. But I, knock on wood, I've been going down there 15 years now, and I've never had a camera die on me out there. But I also take precautions to make sure it doesn't get submerged or anything like that. So just kind of be aware and take those precautions. We give a pretty good packing list to all our people that show up on these expeditions.
Hard shell cases like pelican cases are discouraged, right? At least once you're on the boat.
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly, if you plan on checking your luggage and you want to go that route, yes, pelican cases work. But as far as bringing pelican cases on shore, not easy to walk around with. I'd much rather have a camera backpack. That way, when I see something, I can quickly switch around, switch out a lens, or even just a dry bag. Sometimes what I'll bring is I'll just bring a very light. I'll have my camera backpack that when I'm going through airports, I'll have all my camera gear with me. But then when I'm actually making landings and on the ship, and I have my camera backpack back in the room, but I'll wrap my camera and my lens in a towel. I'll pop that in the dry bag, and then I'm kind of quick and agile, full Navy SEAL style, getting off and on the Zodiacs, and then I can walk around and pull out whatever lens I need and still travel light. Quick, light, agile.
Right on. Okay, Scott, I appreciate it. Look, I want to thank everyone for coming out. We hit almost 100 people. Huge turnout. So I'm going to post in the chat. We still have room on our October 2025 trip if you guys want to go with Scott next year, as well as links to our socials. We're constantly updating our socials with trips from photos and videos from this trip and many other trips. So everybody go there if you still would like to go on the trip. I also wanted to mention that we are currently running a limited time offer till January 10th. It's $1,000 off new bookings. And then if you've already booked the trip, you get $250 back for referrals on new bookings. But again, that's only till January 10th. So your holiday season is in front of you. If anybody else has any questions after we're done, feel free to shoot us an email at info@cheesemans.com and we can get some answers to you. We appreciate everyone for taking their time. If it's a Saturday for you too, wherever you are in the world, this is your free time. So we very much value that and appreciate that. And we hope we get to see more people on the trip in October. Thanks to everyone for coming out. Scott, thank you so much for your insights. And we hope to see everyone out in the world in the future. Experience, learn, and protect the Cheesemans way. Right, Scott?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, guys. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. We'll see you guys on the road.